Welcome to the Microscopists, a bite-sized bio podcast, hosted by Peter O'Toole, sponsored by Zeiss Microscopy.
This time on the Microscopists, I'm joined by a pivotal figure in bioimage analysis, Robert Haase. In this episode, he chats about the challenges of creating AI-relevant courses for bioimage analysis, a field that is evolving at lightning speed. Plus, he shares why he likes to change jobs so often and the unique perspective this gives him. And he shares how many hours he spent playing GTA. All in this episode of the Microscopists. Hi, I'm Peter O'Toole and welcome to this episode of the Microscopists. Today, I welcome back, actually, Robert Haase from Leipzig University. Robert, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. How are you?
It's a pleasure. So last time we spoke very much about new bias, glow bias, and just image analysis. But actually, you are one of the biggest names in image analysis, without question. Before you go, no. And it'd be really good, I thought, to actually get to know you in person better and to really get to understand why it's your passion in life, where it came from, whether it was a mistake to follow this career path in hindsight.
But you should know where you're going. That's why it's good to have these kind of chats from time to time. Exactly, yeah. So I had a bit an unusual career path, so I'm happy to explain in detail.
Yeah, well, actually start, because you didn't go straight into university, did you?
Yes, exactly. So this is in Germany, I would say it's a common thing that you do an apprenticeship in a company, you work there a bit. I basically did an apprenticeship as a programmer, and then I became at some point team leader at an age of 21. And that's quite young for a team
Yeah.
leader. And also, I would not say that I did it particularly well, even though I was successful on the project side, I would say. But I then saw my friends from my childhood, how they were hanging out in university studying and also hanging out. And I also wanted to do that. And that's why I basically decided to drop the job and start studying. So
That was
Germany quite normal.
but that's a big change though, because if you're obviously being very successful in a career, only age of 21, but going places with it, was it not a financial question in that thinking,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on the one hand, if you acquire programming skills in a company and then decide to study, you can continue working in this company. It's what I also did. So basically as a freelancer. So that's absolutely okay. And I think that in particular in IT, in computer science, this would work. Nevertheless, I was lucky that I also have kind of not super rich, but wealthy parents, who were supporting me along the road, right? So that also is kind of good in this particular context. But I would say, as a computer scientist, you could also do it without parents with a lot of money. So that should be doable because you don't have to go to the bar in the night and work there as a barkeeper like many other students do. You can just work during the semester break, for example, and you can earn a lot of money if you are an experienced developer who worked in a company before. So the hourly payment is quite high in that particular situation.
actually, my son did, my eldest son did computer science, maths with computer science, and actually it was his internship that led to his out of study job. And actually, when he graduated, he's now with that company. Yes, it works very nicely, and career options are very, very good. So what? So you just fancied just the academic lifestyle or the university studying lifestyle? Was that the reason for the switch?
It wasn't effectively the reason for the switch, but I would say that this made me most happy later. And also, you have in your life from time to time the situation where you ask yourself, am I happy in academia or do I want to work in a company? And this kind of decisions, right? And as I worked in a company in industry before I studied, I pretty much know that I'm happy in academia because here I can a bit follow my own ideas and yeah, investigate things which you in a company as a programmer you typically do not have this freedom, let's say it like that. And that's why whenever I ask myself, shall I stay at the university or shall I go to a company, I'm pretty okay, fine, happy with my job at the university. So it's quite unlikely that I will go back to industry.
But I don't know your salary, but I'm presuming your salary cannot be anywhere close. Judging by your face. to what it would be if if you went back into industry though.
Certainly. So, I mean, we know roughly what students earn in companies when they leave the university, when they do the master thesis with us, and they afterwards go into a company. So they tell us what they earn. So they earn more than we do after many years in university. But it's not all. I'm sorry to say that, but it's not all about the money. Yeah.
No, I think that's really cool. I get quite a lot of kickback. I used to get a lot of kickback when I was employing data scientists, and we kind of have a fit. We can only offer so much money, and we were told you'll never employ anyone because they'll go off to work for Google or to banking or to the
Mm.
markets,
Yeah.
and earn shed loads more. Why would they come to do this job? And you're right, it's the academic freedom. It's the ability to support research, to actively aid research into whether it be cancer or environmental changes or whatever element it is. It's quite a privileged position, I would say. But it doesn't pay well, but the impact you can have societally is very large.
I presume so. I would also say that culture is changing a bit. So we see already for a couple of years that a lot of companies are working on open source projects. And I think as a high academic, as somebody with a PhD, you can certainly be lucky and start working in a startup, for example, where they give you the similar academic freedom to how you, for example, would have it at the university. So I would say the border is not so solid anymore. So there's like different gray values in between. But on the other hand, what was also, at least the last years, very motivating to me is that I like teaching. And this is certainly something you do not find, or you more rarely find in companies. So it would then be a bit a different job then.
So I was going to say, obviously, the teaching side adds another element, but also maybe job security.
I think it's much harder to get fired if you have a permanent position at the university compared to you work in a startup, which can be bankrupt next year. So, yeah, maybe.
So even though you're very happy in the academic world, how many different universities have you worked for or in?
So at the end, let's say two or actually three, but in the first university where I studied, so I studied at the University of Applied Sciences in Dresden. That's, if you look a bit from a global perspective, it's not a university. Also in Germany, it's a different word. It's basically an engineering school. So the people who leave the university there do their master's degree a bit faster, like 1 year less, and
Mhm.
they are typically software engineers and not computer scientists. So I started working there, but just for half a year. Then I worked multiple times actually for the university in Dresden. I mean, at the end, how long was I on this campus? I worked on the same campus for 15 years, but
Oh,
for different employers, like going from house to house whenever my position ended, continue working in a different group, also on a different topic. And now I work at the university in Leipzig, which is like 150 kilometers away.
but that's now a more stable, permanent position.
Exactly. So here I got a permanent position. The common deal in academia is, or this in the German system, you get an administrative duty and you have to take care of it. And then on the side you can do free research. Let's call it like that. And then there are people who do in their free research who time do independent research, like doing stuff, mathematical, theoretical work. And there are others who apply for grants and build up groups. And it's really, really nice to see that in this institute where I work now, an artificial intelligence research institute, SCATS AI, we have this freedom. We can decide. So there are people on these kind of academic administrative positions who do independent research and others build up groups. And my administrative duty is I'm the training coordinator of the institute, so I can take care of the teaching. So it's like I think I was partially made for this kind of position.
So what does a training coordinator entail? I think I can
This
guess, but actually I'm not sure I guessed correctly.
it's like it's always with these kind of positions you also have some let's call it administrative freedom. I had to figure that out myself. And I would not say that this is finally decided or that there was any board meeting at some point saying, Robert, you have to do this and this and this. It's not like that. You have to first get to know all the people around. So I was new to this field when I joined. I was for many years not working in artificial intelligence. Now I work in an AI institute, and I had to get to know everybody. What are their skills? What are they working on? The individual groups, and what kind of trainings could they, for example, offer? Or some of them are offering trainings, others not yet, but they do train like university teaching, and they have materials which we could turn into training materials. So figuring out what is available was my first task, maybe for the first year, and now we are ramping up a training program. At the end, I was inspired by the Advanced Training Center, the ATC at the EMBL Heidelberg. So whenever somebody within the institute or close by university and so on ask me what is my business model and how is this supposed to work, I basically explain how the training center at the EMBL Heidelberg works, and I say I would like to do it similarly, a bit smaller though, not building an own building yet. But that you basically organize multiple trainings a year, and with organization, I do not mean I'm not organizing it directly, and I'm also not teaching there. I'm just trying to bring the right people together so that it happens.
That's interesting actually, because every science moves on fast. Yeah, it's relatively
AI,
fast. But
in particular.
AI seems to be moving a feeling exponentially faster than many other sciences. So how on earth do you keep any courses relevant? It sounds like much hard. If you were a lecturer, you prep material and you update it each year, but it evolves fairly slowly in the main. AI surely almost like rewriting the books every year. I guess the basics are the same, but then
Mhm.
is that daunting? Is that the reality of it?
I think it is partially the reality, in particular when you think about large language models and ChatGPT and these kind of technologies, generative AI, we are talking a lot about these days. And when I do a training this year and when I do a training next year, the materials will be different, at least to a large degree. So you said it already, the basics remain the same. And if I, for example, teach, so we had last year, we had a course, the theme, the content comes from my time in Dresden, and we did it first time in Leipzig, was a course on bioimage analysis, bioimage data science for biologists. So we teach them supervised machine learning, unsupervised machine learning. And this might, in the field, look a bit advanced, like, okay, we can do here some advanced statistical models to figure out which parameter influences our phenotypes and maybe see some relations with genotypes and these kind of things. But from a computer science perspective, this is like basic stuff. This is what we computer scientists learn in the machine learning lecture in the third semester. So it's like bachelor level. You can continue, you can run a lot of trainings on this level because many people need exactly that.
Mhm.
And when it comes to large language models and like fancy generative AI, my strategy at the moment is to go a bit with the hype. And for example, these days, many people are talking about agents. AI agents are taking over my work, are answering emails for me, and these kind of things. And yeah, of course, you can program agents which can answer your emails, but they may not be like super production ready. So you may not actually let them answer your emails. So having some exercises where we program these systems is at hand. But these exercises may be different next year if we are no longer talking about agents so much anymore because we know the limitations better. And then we may talk about different things.
So do you realize it was your AI agent that actually said yes to doing this podcast with me, and then realize what your AI agent committed you to?
Yeah, so actually, so this is a virtual representation of me. I'm sitting on the couch in the other room, relaxing. So this hypothesis is in the air, yeah. So that in the future, AI agents may talk to each other, make an appointment, because they know my schedule and they know that I never have Zoom meetings after 6 p.m. And that's why, so you know that may actually happen, but it's not like so super close. But the technology programming an AI agent doing a job, doing a specific task is at hand, and you can program this with 20 lines of Python code. Like it's really not complicated.
Yeah, it's not complicated if you know what you're doing.
Maybe. I mean, in my
Yeah.
case, I spent now something like 1.5 years diving into this topic, and I also had other stuff to do, right? So, and I'm now quite confident that I have a good overview about the field, and I know in particular in the bioimage analysis context, I know what large language models can be used for. And if I now wanted to develop like advanced new tools, I would have to have like PhD students, postdocs working on this in a dedicated way. I can make training materials. This is basically, I do have the time for this. But then doing actually research and moving the field forward is like much more involved and
Mhm.
may take much longer.
That's kind of reassuring because the problem seemed really challenging. And I do worry if it was solved too easily, I wouldn't trust it. I'm not sure
Yeah,
because it sounds really daft. It's just image analysis, but oh my God, life science image analysis is so much harder than tracking people walking around a train station, for example, going in and out of trains and still catching them because we look the same. Cells don't look the same from 1 second to the next, do they?
exactly. No, and also the kind of questions we ask in scientific image analysis and bioimage analysis are much more specific. So how many molecules of this protein are going from the cytoplasm into the membrane of the nucleus? So imagine you would have a similar question in like natural imaging. You have persons walking over the street and you want to know chemicals moving from this just doesn't exist. It only exists in scientific image analysis, these kind of tasks. And every project is different and every image looks different. And the community who works on these kind of topics, who programs these image analysis scripts and like more sophisticated tools is much smaller than the computer vision community who looks into images of trees and cars and persons and cats and dogs. So that's why I would agree that it's much more challenging. What was a bit shocking to me, I must admit, is that when you try, so we have this benchmark for applying bioimage analysis, applying large language models to bioimage analysis tasks, and we measure how often these language models can produce code which does the correct thing. So we are not just looking if the code looks okay, we are executing this code and we look if the result is correct. And there it turns out that these nowadays state-of-the-art commercial large language models can program something like 5 to 10 lines of Python code and which runs correctly in 50 or 60% of the cases. How many image analysts do you know who can write 5 to 10 lines of Python code and immediately this code does the right thing? I cannot. So from this perspective, the large language models are superior to us. But if you give a large language model into the hand of somebody who cannot code, they can do terrible things because they just work in 50% of the cases. So
And they
that's
don't
our
know how to
challenge.
fix it or necessarily that it's wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
So what got you into bioimage analysis, the bioimage side of things? You've got all this computing science, the world is your oyster. You could go in almost so many different directions. You chose bioimage analysis.
Yeah. So we have to go one step back. I was in my university and I was studying, and we have in the fifth or sixth semester, we have to do a practical semester. So we have to leave university for half a year,
Mhm.
and we have to go to a company, or in my case, it was a different university. I joined in the University of Technology in Dresden for my internship, and I was on the medical campus in a research in cancer research institute named Oncobay. I mean, I really joined them, or I was looking forward to my interview there and so on, because I thought, young computer scientist, I thought that I can help to heal cancer. And that was kind of very motivating to me. And then on the second stage, basically, I started doing image analysis, and it was first of all it was MRI, PET imaging, histology, and
Mhm.
then years later, after my PhD, so another 8 years later, I became a bioimage analyst. Before I was more on the cancer research side in the medical imaging, which is I do not exactly know why, but it's a disconnected field. So the medical imaging people and the microscopy imaging people, the image analysts from these two sides, hardly communicate and hardly exchange on a regular basis. So it's different fields.
Yeah, and that's just not the analysts, I don't think. I think that's also the operators of the MRIs and the
Extras, yeah.
microscopies. They're quite disparate. Uh, I just thought the analysis has probably got more in common than the actual acquisition.
Yeah, I could imagine so. So we are also using a lot of libraries for processing microscopy images, and then these libraries later turns out comes from medical imaging originally. We just forgot.
Or reinvented the wheel on that side.
Yeah, sometimes we also reinvent the wheel.
So, so that's interesting. It's about eight. So it was 8 years, and then you discovered microscopy, bioimage analysis. How many years ago was that to today?
But that was, I think I joined So this, I worked in a company, Psionics, from 2015, if I remember correctly. And this was basically a company providing services to a Max Planck Institute. So I basically, effectively, I stayed in academia, worked in a scientific research institute, the Max Planck Institute for Cell Biology and Genetics in Dresden. But I was hired by a company, so I also had a little bit a different salary, let's say it like that.
Mhm.
And I actually was also in a permanent position there after 2 years. So that's what basically the deal they did there. That's now 10 years ago. Oh my God. I joined them 10 years ago and I was with them for something like 3 years. And in these 3 years, I must highlight that at that point, I learned so much because I did my PhD before on this one project. And I did maybe two or three other projects with scientists at the institute. But then I joined this company who was operating this core facility, the scientific computing core facility. And I was then in these 2 or 3 years at this Max Planck Institute. I think I did 200 projects. I learned so much. I've seen so many different things. I interacted with so many people, and I was wishing so often that I would have, and maybe in a second life, I would study biology so that I understand what they're all talking about. It was really a massive income in knowledge in my brain because I was exposed to so many scientific questions. It was really, really fun.
How many projects are you working on at the moment?
Ah, much less. It became much less bioimage analysis problems. And I would say I have now maybe in parallel something like 20 projects. And in most of these projects, I play a consulting role. So I help people to find the right algorithm or I organize some trainings. So that's my job nowadays.
Did-
Very
did-
different.
That's cool. Before we started this podcast, I was talking to a peer elsewhere in the UK, and the data scientist team that we have at York has multiple projects on the go. Yeah, they're a service, but they're also applying their academic skills and actually adding to, so they're co-authoring publications, so that they are also being inventive. And there was another example where they said, yes, our data scientists, no chance. They all have ownership of a project. And so they're academically led rather than more the applied led.
Mm.
And so each data scientist there has picked up a project and that's what they run with. I thought, that's not very helpful.
Both, to some degree. I have a discussion quite often. We cannot talk about this too long because I become angry at some point. Um, but there is this aspect of co-authorship versus service. And I have a very strong opinion on this.
Mm.
If I provide a service to someone so that their project can happen, I am co-author per
Yeah, because
definition.
you've done that work. It's because you like the postdoc or the academic for that aspect. Absolutely.
But unfortunately, many people say, but Robert, we paid you for that. So
You
that's why
pay
you
your
cannot
postdoc to
become
do the work.
my words, exactly. So this is unfortunately I still have this discussion a bit too often. I would say I have it less in Leipzig now because at this data science institute we all have a common understanding of the situation and
Yeah.
we all act very similarly. But if you, in particular, if you cross disciplines, when it comes to core authorships, I have the feeling. So this is my personal opinion. Please don't overrate it. But
Yeah.
when it comes to core authorships, I have the feeling in medicine people are proud of having many co-authors. Look, I brought together all these people and we made it happen. And in biology, maybe not every subfield of biology, but in biology or biophysics or somewhere there, it's more
Yes.
like, look, me and my PhD students did it. Oh, and by the way, in the acknowledgements, we also had help from these other 20 people. What?
I,
So
physics the same. Physics, big multiple author papers are the standard, and I think I'm a big. So actually, our facility, I think the stats came out the other day. We were doing a summary to the academics. 68% of all publications that use the facility have one or more team members as a co-author.
hmm,
I think that's quite
that's
high because
actually good.
sometimes it is just routine turn the handle service. That's not co-authorship, but quite often there is intellectual input into it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there is, and I think this is important, and I think it's communication from us. I think it's our responsibility to communicate the importance
Yeah.
of what our real inputs are. Because I think sometimes they'll give you the work, Robert, and they won't realize how inventive you've been.
That's
And
also
so
that
they
also
won't
has.
realize that. And so hence it's not a coauthorship. Oh, you could just do that, not realizing you've had to invent something for it.
I'm just wondering if we had the same or a related discussion in this other meeting together with Kota and Elnas, but I think we have had
Maybe.
this point before that it has also something to do with how we sell ourselves. If I show off and send somebody a 10-line Python
Mm.
script which does the job, it looks from my perspective looks like, "Mwah, I made it in 10 lines, in just 10 lines, you know. But for the others on the other side, it's like, oh, it's just 10 lines, so he shouldn't be co-author. But if I spend 2 weeks on that or just a single afternoon, they don't know. And that's why we have to. I changed my strategy a bit over the years. I code less analysis scripts for the people, and I do more consulting, guiding them so that they can program it themselves. That has two effects. The one effect is that they see that it's actual work. And not just easy going. And the other effect is that they can do the next project without me, which allows me altogether to have more impact on the field at the
Yeah.
end.
And it gives them independence and it's trained them.
Mhm.
As a training coordinator, tick.
Yeah. Maybe there was a good reason to hire me in a position of a training coordinator because I
Yeah.
have these kind of opinions. I remember the interview at the institute where I know that we had a common understanding of these kind of aspects. We were, for example, estimating. So my now boss, Eric Polkert, and me, we had independent from each other. We never met before. We never spoke to each other, but we had independent from each other a similar opinion about the following fact. A co-facility engineer who does service with other people should approximately spend their time like 30% for services and 60% on development of their skills or on other stuff like going conferences, developing, for example, doing a PhD or these kind of things. That's a good ratio. Just from us two, right? But it was to me a big surprise that we, independent from each other, had a similar estimation of this kind of number, which is kind of very important in this context because that's how you hire people. If you cannot hire a data scientist on a 100% service position, it has something to do with the fact that 100% service nobody wants to do. But if you tell them, look, you are very skilled. So if you analyze some images, you will take it in very short time. And that's why 30% of your time we buy from you. And in the remaining 60, 70% of the time, you can develop yourself and you can write papers with us. And then suddenly much more people are interested in these kind of positions.
But I'd say even the service bit isn't true service. It's service, but it's still innovative. It's still developing. It's still doing that 60% of the time 'cause you're having to learn
Yeah.
to.
And of course, it's like a number over the thumb, right? I would also say that in particular, if you have like an early career data scientist comes just from the university or maybe has some first job already behind them, they should do more service at the very beginning. And then if they have, for example, a 3-year contract, like in academia so often, they should maybe do then less service towards the end of the time. So that they basically at the beginning are exposed to many projects, like me in the core facility back in the days, that you learn a lot of things. And if you then, for example, identify many of these projects, there's the same thing. We have to count cells, like in histone staining or whatever. Then you can maybe say, okay, let's now set up a project. Let's do a paper about it. You can develop your career. You will do less services now and develop something for this particular task so many people have. That's how I was selling also the job to the people I hired in my group in Dresden, and it worked quite well, I would say.
Well, I'm going to take you back in time to when you were 8, 9, 10 years of age. Can you remember what the first job you ever wanted to do?
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. I know many, many people who never knew what they want to do. And I tell you now something which is also for me partially hard to believe. But at an age of 11, I started programming because my father showed me a bit. I found it fascinating and I started. And not late after, at the age of 12, 13, 14 or so, I decided the following. I will become a programmer. I will found a company. And as soon as this company thing doesn't work anymore, I will go to the university and give lectures about how to program. And this is pretty much what happened. I actually had this company, so so I've followed my path exactly like that. The only tick that is missing is I was always dreaming of becoming a professor. I'm not a professor yet.
Yet, yet.
It's the last tick in the list.
So, hint, hint. anyone from Leipzig watching, listening. Uh, so, okay, if you could do any job in the world just for a day or a week to try something different, what job, what position would you like to try?
Oh, yeah, so first of all, the science and also the close to biology thing is really something I like a lot, and that's why I would not choose something very different.
Mhm.
But I'm quite fascinated. I was always quite fascinated whenever I was visiting institutes near the coast. So the marine biologist would be certainly something I wanted to try out. Also, these Arctic explorers who hang out there for half a year running experiments. Um, it's maybe it would be too cold for me. I don't like winter so much, but being kind of in a remote place for some time and doing experiments there would certainly also be something I would be interested in trying out. Unfortunately, computer scientists can do their jobs from home. That's why we don't do so many expeditions. Also, we have at the Institute Earth scientists. I like collaborating with the Earth scientists a lot because of the richness of their data. So here I would do pretty much the same like a data scientist, but I like diving into look at completely different data sets, seismology, for example. As an image analyst, you have no idea what you can do with this kind of data, and it's fun to do these kind of explorations from time to time.
Have you ever thought about going for 1 or 2 weeks shadowing? Have you actually spent 2 weeks in a wet lab, a wet biological lab, getting the cells, putting them on, getting the images? Have you ever done that side of it?
I have done it much longer actually. So after finishing my job at the core, this story told in another way. When I worked in this core facility for something like 2 or 3 years, I was basically I heard my own career advice. I gave myself, or it was some discussions with friends years earlier. We said something like, if you start a new job after 2 or 3 years, you should ask yourself if this is really the job you want to do for the rest of your life. And then you should potentially move on. So I'm doing this every 2 or 3 years. And in this core facility job, again, I learned a lot, and the interaction with the biologists was great, but it felt so restless. And then you do one project after the other, and at some point you question why you are doing this. And I think I'm not so alone in this particular situation. Many people have this kind of feeling and then move on. And I was super lucky that there was a position open in Gene Meyer's lab because another guy, you may know him, Loïc Royer, was leaving. So I had the opportunity, the big honor, to take over the postdoc position from Loïc Royer and continue the development at the microscope. They had a big light sheet microscope in the lab. The microscope was running, built by Nicola Margelli, mostly, and Loïc programmed the software that the machinery was working. And then I could do something like 2 or 3 years postdoc there, including sample preparation, including putting fly embryos in FEP tubes and mounting them in a microscope. And I did this for something like 3 years. And it was an amazing experience. I'm afraid not every computer scientist can go into this, but if you have the chance to get this experience, I just highly recommend for one reason. When I was working in this consulting position before, I often told the biologist, can you please make better images?
Which is why I
And
suggested
after,
shadowing.
yeah, yeah. And after I did my postdoc in this lab, I never said this sentence again because I know now how hard it is. And that's why this experience was really, really good for me.
I've got two questions on the back, but I think you'll probably know Laura Wiggins, who did a PhD with us, and we got her to generate all her own data. So
Yeah,
she understood the provenance and the limitations of you could get out the date, not the limitations of what you could get out of it, but the limitations of acquiring the data is quite constrained. It's quite difficult.
it
How
is. It
daunting
is.
was it uh, to step into Loic's position?
Ah, yeah. So I must admit, when I took the position, I had no idea what will be coming. So I was expecting, again, I was not aware that making good images is so hard. That's why it was a big opportunity. The machine was amazing. I'm not sure if you have ever heard about the X-wing microscope. It was four illuminations arranged like an X
Okay,
and two
yeah.
detections. It was an amazing machine. It was really like absolutely fantastic to work with this thing, but also extremely challenging. So yeah, I mean, I took this opportunity a bit naive at the very beginning, I would say, and also here again, I learned a lot.
And did you know of Loic particularly before you took that position?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we were sitting in the same building already for, I'm not sure, yeah, 3 years or something. So he
Okay.
was there all the time. Of course, we did not talk every day because we are in different labs on different floors, but I knew him before. And I also remember, and he also remembers, that we were on a hackathon something like a year or so before. Then Loic was moving on. And we were sitting next to each other and we were doing coding. And I think Loic was also reviewing a paper, a bit like the academic work. And I was more on the coding side because I was in this core facility. And at some point in the discussion, and I'm sure Loic remembers this sentence as well, Loic told me, Robert, don't you want to stop this core facility thing and get a real job? And then a year later, I had his job.
Love it. I'm going to ask you another question now. What's been the most fun time in your career? If you go back and relive a year, what's been the most fun time?
The most fun time. Yeah, we had fun in different ways on different stages of your career. I mean, I would not say that any. So I did my PhD in this cancer research institute. I was the only computer scientist around, and we had this kind of academic fun PhD students have when they travel together to conferences. I remember, for example, that we had a shared apartment with 8 people at some point in Cologne for a week. It was, I mean, we were at a scientific conference there, but it was effectively a party week. So it was fun on the one side, right? But on the other end of my career, other end, it's not an end. When I was in Dresden, I was group leader. We were at some point quite many people, maybe 10 or so, sitting together for a group meeting, this weekly or bi-weekly thing. And we were sitting in front of a big screen, and somebody was typing, and all the others were brainstorming together. And then we had kind of a common understanding of how to approach problems. That was also fun, completely on a different level, in a different dimension. But we never had this in any of the labs where I worked before. This kind of we take our time to solve a problem together and look together on a big screen and code. We write one code with written by many brains. We never had this before, so that was also a fun time. Definitely. I hope the others agree.
I'll just nod. Uh, what about the flip side to that? What's been the most difficult time in your career? Most challenging or most difficult time?
Yeah, I'm afraid that over the course of an academic career, you are exposed to more and more politics. And this is certainly not the fun part. I'm sure there are people who enjoy this kind of work. I don't. Uh, you have to at some point justify things where you think they are self-explanatory, and that can be quite challenging. I remember, for example, what was really difficult for me. I do not want to blame anyone in particular or any institute. That's why I phrase it very carefully.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be a group leader who gives an environment to their people where they can be happy. And at some point, we moved into a room where there was quite loud noise and also not enough space for everyone. That's why my team was at some point distributed over 4 buildings on campus. So we had issues in meeting. That's why also this fun time, meeting all the people sitting together.
Yeah.
And that was basically just a political issue. And I was really, really struggling in solving this issue. And I think everybody hits that at some point that you started a new university or something, and then there's the room is not fitting, or your institute moves to a new place and your group is suddenly in the basement. But everybody has this kind of experience someday, and there's like it's hard to find good advice. So what should I do now? And how can I fix that? It was for me a big challenge. And I hope that my team members were happy back in the days. But in particular, I have such a noisy device in the room can be frustrating.
Yeah, okay. Uh, bad days. What do you do outside of work to chill out? What are your hobbies?
Oh yeah, I do a lot of computer gaming.
Okay,
I
so
hang
what's
out in
your
front of the
favorite
PC
game?
too much.
What computer games you playing?
Yeah, there is a computer game, Grand Theft Auto GTA, and I realized at some point, so that was during the pandemic. I realized at some point there is in Steam is the program called where you have all the games installed, and it tells you how many hours you spent with playing this particular game. And I reached at some point the point when this software told me that I played GTA for 80 days.
18 days.
80.
80 days.
80.
80. 80.
Yes. Also, apparently I'm playing this game a lot. Um, sometimes just driving around. You can go out and cycle with the bicycle along the river. I did this in Dresden a lot back in the days. Or you can just sit on your couch and drive with your car along the river virtually. And it turns out that this is like not so exhausting.
It's not so healthy either.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe that's true. Yes.
Any other hobbies? Well, you
Um,
can't. You spend 80 days just doing that.
no, it's like if I have to tell like my particular hobby, I'm not doing music, I'm not painting. So I at some point I also thought that it's actually wrong, but I actually turned my hobby into a job. So I was programming as a kid, as an 11-year-old. So here also when I, for example, just imagine I come back from a conference, which was a bit stressful, or I had a lot of paperwork to do during the week. And then on the weekend, Sunday morning, on the couch with a coffee, I code something because that's relaxing for me. That's what is fun. So sometimes, in particular, in stressful days when I do not have time for coding or no project to code, I actually program stuff at home and find it very satisfying. So it's like deep inside my brain. That's my favorite hobby and my job.
Any sports activities? No.
Hiking from time to time, but really rarely.
Well, obviously
Yes.
not down the river because you can do that in Grand Theft Auto. So
Yes, exactly. You could also hike there, but would be super boring.
maybe ask some quick fire questions.
Yes.
Are you an early bird? I know this answer already. Are you an early bird or night owl?
I was born as a night owl and I'm these days an early bird.
Oh, you switched.
Kind of forced. And not like with pressure, but my girlfriend, my partner, is an early bird, and we stand up together. And I love her, and that's all good.
Okay, that's cool. PC or Mac?
PC.
Oh, okay. McDonald's or Burger King?
Ah, McDonald's.
What's your favorite thing at McDonald's?
McRib, which you cannot get in the US typically. I'm not sure. From time to time you can.
Oh, yeah, UK's got it back on the menu at the moment, I think.
Ah, yeah.
Not that I should know that. I do. I've still got children. Of course I do. And when I don't, I'll still know. But there you are. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Yeah. Beer or wine?
When I was younger, beer, and nowadays wine.
Red or white?
Red.
Yeah. Chocolate or cheese?
Both, but not mixed.
What is Bard or Gemini?
Oh, can you repeat?
Bard or Gemini?
Um, in this case, Gemini.
What's your favorite food? What's your if you were to eat out or to be taken out for dinner, what would be the ideal thing to be served?
Um, let's say the other way around. What I like, so there's a specific food which I like preparing, which I like making, and then also eating. It is a comes from my hometown. In some bar they had it. It's basically a salad bowl where you have salad in there,
Mhm.
then some fried potatoes on top, and then an egg
Uh,
basically closing the bowl. I'm not sure if it has a name, but I like this a lot.
yeah, no, I know it. I can't remember what it's called, but yes, I definitely know it. So I was going to ask if you prefer to cook or wash.
Uh, Cook, but I do
I was
both.
guessing so. Eat in or eat out?
Um, Eat in, actually.
Yep. And what is your least favorite food? What food would you actually think, oh no, I really don't like that. I don't want to eat that.
So I really do not like pineapple.
Pineapple.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a different one to not like.
Hmm?
That's a different one. I've never had someone say pineapple. That's a first.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, do you know what? Every morning, the first thing I eat every morning, pineapple.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I cut one up at the start of a week, put it to cake, and then just have so many chunks that I've cut up fresh pineapple before I go running
Yeah.
or swimming. Just,
So
can't
you
beat
are a very
pineapple.
sporty person.
Man, you can't beat pineapple. Book
I'm
or
sorry.
TV? Okay. Book or TV?
Can you repeat? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just again, book or TV?
TV. I hardly read, so I do not read full books. I have a lot of books, like technical books, and I always read one chapter or one fact,
Yeah.
but I hardly read a book from the beginning to the end.
And do you watch anything trashy on TV?
Uh, yes, there was recently a movie I love a lot, in particular with the current political situation. The movie is called Idiocracy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Not seen.
Highly recommended.
Next question is typically, what is your favorite film?
Okay, so we have it.
There you go. What's your favorite Christmas film? I know it's not Christmas, but what is your favorite Christmas film?
There should come something to my mind, but at the moment it doesn't.
This is a dumb question. Image J on the Pari.
Ah, that's
Ooh.
a very fascinating question because 10 years ago I would have said Image. 3 years ago I would have said Napari, and now I will tell you Jupiter.
Okay. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure if this has something to do with my transition to a teaching person,
Mhm.
because Jupyter notebooks are fantastic for documenting how things work and then also for transferring knowledge into people in other people's brain. Because you always see a piece of code and then you see the intermediate result, a piece of code, intermediate result, and everybody can understand and reproduce this workflow. And you can neither with Napari nor with ImageJ, you can do it like that. So it's very challenging to come up with something where other people can read and understand what the workflow is doing. So I'm programming more workflows like this, and this might have to do with something, might have to do with the fact that I'm again not analyzing data for people anymore, but rather telling people how to do it. And then they may continue in this Jupyter notebook, or they may write Python code in a normal Python file. So yeah.
So I'm guessing you're a big advocate of freeware over commercial packages, or do you see a place for both?
Definitely see a place for both. So I'm using Windows, which is a commercial system I paid for. I'm using Microsoft Office. I'm advertising the same company again. So I buy a lot of software for these typical daily tasks, and I'm happy to pay for it. In particular, if it's a good software. Maybe one another example from a much smaller company. It's called Beyond Compare. And I think it's a single British person who runs their company, or it's a very small company at least. And you pay some dollars for this software license, and you can compare files and folders very conveniently. So I'm happy to pay for good software. So no big deal. But I think in particular on the science side, science can advance faster if we share things openly. And that's not just for code, that's much more important for data. I also think that there are now more and more companies diving into open source software development, like having business models involving open source software by, for example, providing services for using this software. So as a company, I develop a software, I put it open source, and then if people want to use it best for their particular purpose, I'm billing them. So this
Mhm.
is certainly a business model. And when it comes to artificial intelligence, the same thing works with the data. So basically, you can use these models for free, and even the code for training a large language model is freely available. But if you want to run the very best model, you have to pay because it only runs on our machine. So all these kind of different business models have their place. And I would in particular say that the old academic system, where we publish a piece of software at the moment when the paper comes out, and then afterwards we develop a new thing, does not work anymore. It's over.
I'm glad I asked that question. Inspirations. Who have been your inspirations over your career?
So we already mentioned Loic Royer. So I learned a lot from him, and he also gave me over the years again and again career advice, which was really, really helpful. Like on the one hand, focusing on what to develop, also how to hire people. So I got a lot of experience from Loic, and in a similar sense, also Pavel Tomanchak was again and again inspiring me a lot. I was actually saying to him at some point that if I would not have become group leader in Dresden, if this had failed for whatever reason, then my next step would have been asking Pavel if I can do a postdoc in his lab for some time.
So he was really supportive then over the time.
So Pavel definitely, at least behind the scenes. Also when I worked for Gene Myers, that was also very good. So he was helping us not just to pursue the right projects, but he was effectively making us group leaders. So that was really, really fascinating. So Gene, who gave us a lot of independence effectively in the lab, and Loic was there before, became group leader. Florian Duke was there before, became group leader. And there is two or three more examples. Dagmar Keinmüller, for example, became group leader in Berlin afterwards. And then, I forgot her name. There's another colleague who now works at Zeiss. So there were again and again people who were in his group becoming group leader afterwards. It had something to do with the independence we had in his lab. And then we had to also get organized. And this kind of project management, organizing things, finding collaborators, we all learned there. So I'm not exactly sure how he made it, but it was very inspirational, actually.
I was going to add, it's a different question. I don't think I've asked anyone on any of the podcasts this question before about their career. And I think because actually bioimage analysis is a difficult career, I think, to prove success in.
Mhm,
And I was going to ask about the metrics for success, but I'd also just like to point out you've got three people you named there who've had lots of impacts of different people's careers, but those metrics are probably never captured and
mhm.
considered. But in the field of bioimage analysis, what are the key metrics for success that are actually monitored and you can take? I say, I want to be a professor, please. You told me that already. These are why I need to be here. Here's my metrics. But what metrics are not typical but should actually be taken into account?
Oh, that's very challenging.
Mm, sorry.
So, if there was something like citations on a software level, that would be great. Because if I develop a small library, doesn't have to be something super complicated, but if I develop a small piece of code which then ends up in the hands of many people and they analyze their data with it, we should maybe make these we should secure these people
Hmm.
in the academic system. There's some examples in the ImageJ context. Maybe you have heard about it, ImGlib2, and maybe not. But maybe you have heard of Big Data Viewer, right? So these were the same people behind. And some of them really struggled in securing their academic career because they were focusing on making fantastic software, which nowadays runs behind everything, right? But it's just one paper, and maybe sometimes it's cited because it's so deep inside the software that people may not even notice. That was actually an active decision. I think I also did it with Florian and Pavel back in the days. We were thinking of you may have heard about CLIJ, GPU accelerated image processing library for Fiji. And back in the days, we had two options. Either we develop a new thing, CLIJ, and write a paper about it and give it to the people, or we GPU accelerate Fiji. And then the next Fiji version will be faster, but there may be no paper or maybe just a small one, and then people will just use it without knowing. And that was really a decision we made because of the state of our academic system. We have to make something new. Otherwise, we will no longer be successful, right? So these
Hmm.
kind of things we have to fix. And I'm not sure if I have an answer to this. There is, yeah, one thing maybe because I was quite happy when I saw that the German big funding agency, DFG, the German Research Foundation, wrote a statement in 2023 in September or so, where they said from now on, was like from one day to another, they changed some of their rules. And the rule was basically before, when you submit a proposal to this big German funding agency, you can cite 10 papers. And then after, that's what they changed. They basically said afterwards, you can submit 10 papers, like publications like before, and 10 additional things which are not classical research papers. So I could immediately list like my teaching materials and some open source libraries. And with that, my market value was increasing by a factor of 2 or 3 from one day to another. So a lot of people who spent their time on open source software, on openly accessible training materials, on YouTube videos, whatever, suddenly could cite these things when applying for funding. I'm not sure how in practice this is actually lived, how many people actually do this, but that's definitely the right way.
Yeah, and so actually UK grant funding agencies similarly, it's gone to a more narrative CV, as they call it now, which you can explain those other impacts. But it's still, even for that professorship, it's hard for the people at the top. They have to understand the impacts and the relevance. And they come from a different environment sometimes that they may be blind to those impacts. So I guess that comes back to communication, doesn't it? Making
Yeah,
sure they know it.
at the end, it's unavoidable. What I also liked about, I think it was the same statement from the DFG, is that in case you, imagine, for example, you want to hire someone, and this person you want to hire is, for example, an image analyst. You don't know so much about image analysis. So how do you decide who is the right person?
Mhm.
We should not go for metrics. How much do they have published, or how many downloads do their favorite Python library have, because this can all be gamified. No, you should actually reach out to an expert from the right domain and ask them. So it's basically boils down to we should more look, and that's what the DFG said. I think we should more look into the content of the research and actually value what the people were doing, and not looking into metrics, which just partially can capture what's happening and can typically also be gamified. So yeah, reach out to a colleague from the image analysis domain and say, look, I have here a couple of applicants. What do you think?
Yeah, but you can just pay them off. It's not
It
even
can also be
gamifying, is it?
Yeah, it can also be tricky, right? Because of data protection and stuff. But I nevertheless think that this is a good approach.
Uh, so I think in France, I've been asked as a reference, and in the UK, I've been asked for reference for people going for professorial positions. You know, can I comment on their standing, their status, what they've done there, their
Yeah.
international? Uh, we are really close to time, but we mentioned about going for that CV change, that the references you can put on a grant application. What is the funding opportunities like for bioimage analysis? Again, because you're not specifically addressing a biological question, which is what most grant funding is geared towards. So how are you finding those challenges? And yeah, how much has CZI helped with that?
See that I helped a lot with that because they funded my CLIJ project. They funded GloBias. So there's like, I actually took quite some opportunities from them. But these days became a bit silent, and the community does not exactly know what's happening and what will be the next steps. So we are looking forward to learn how the future funding program from them looks like. Also, other funding agencies, including the German one, they from time to time have some calls where you can apply for as a software engineer, as a data
Special
scientist.
initiatives?
So it's from time to time that happens. But I think, in particular, for people out there looking at this video for who want to become group leader, or who are just starting their own group, a different advice is much more important. So when I started as a PI, one of my first meetings during the pandemic via Zoom was with a consultant from the German funding agency, from the DFG. And I told him, look, I develop software, and this software makes it easier for biologists to analyze their data. So how can I get grants? And he immediately boldly said, Robert, with this story, you cannot. We are paying science and not software engineering. So like really like breaking my motivation to zero. And then he explained to me that I, as a computer scientist, as a software developer applying for grants, will not get it because I do not have a scientific question, a biological question at hand. But if the biologists apply for funding, say they want to do quantitative data analysis, they will also not get the money because they do not have the experience, typically. So you have to do this together. And this is how the majority of my grants came into my group then afterwards. So I got most of the money by collaborating with other people, like, for example, Pavel Tomachak. With him, I wrote one of my first proposals, like big proposals where I actually got a postdoc position out, you have to team up with the people from the other domain, do something together where you both profit from, so don't sell yourself under value, and then do a project together. And this will also naturally lead to a software which actually solves a certain purpose, because there are then biologists on board which can guide the software developers in the right direction, which is also extremely important.
So, which is great. It's exactly what we've said to our data scientists. They shouldn't have to write their own grants. They should just be co-I on so many grants that actually they've got an easy life. Other people write their grants for them.
Partially, that's true, yes. In particular, when you're a beginner, right? That's the best. Get a senior, and they write this grant together with you. You will just write a section and read what they are doing. It's exactly how you learn it.
But it's interesting because this then comes to the other crux. I'm a very big advocate at York that the data science team are there for that purpose, to be those co-applicants, the co-authors, sometimes lead authors when they do other bits, which is different to academics in computer science per se, who have got their own specific area and having to apply grants for that specific area. Both are good. Neither's wrong. I quite like the fact from your perspective, you can have far more impact across far more different fields than one niche area. Your field isn't going to go out of fashion overnight. Whereas actually, if you're studying one area, the whole world could fall apart with the wrong publication by someone else that just blows you out the water, and you're dead in the water at that point. Whereas actually, you are very de-risked. I don't know if you've thought about how great a position it is.
Yeah, we data scientists, we never get bored. I think also, Shoaib Tilevest said it in a very nice way at some point, that we never run out of projects, and there is always projects to choose from. So we are not forced to stay on the same track. Also, if I look back in my career, I started working on medical imaging and algorithms called ant colony optimization. So it was before deep learning. Exactly what you just said happened. There was this deep learning hype around 2012, 2015, which eliminated a lot of research in other fields, and everybody was suddenly doing deep learning. Like nowadays, everybody is doing language models. So these things happen. And then I changed my field. I was then suddenly working in image, developing Java for a couple of years. Now I do Python and language models. Like I do different stuff every 5 years, like completely different stuff. And I could imagine that it stays like that, at least if you want to. I could also well imagine that you can just become, teaching professor somewhere and teach the same thing for the rest of your career. That might also be possible, but not exactly my path.
We are up to just over an hour, Robert. So I should say thank you very much. I will be actually pointing Alistair, who's my data science lead, actually heads the unit. It's like listening to him. It's the same argument, same comments, same thoughts, same inspiration. So it's great to hear from someone else as well. Robert, thank you for taking your time to me today. I've still got questions I wanted to ask, but next time.
Next time. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. It was fun.
Pleasure. We need to grab a glass of red wine together at some point, not the beer anymore. And I'm going to put the cheese, probably red wine.
Yeah, maybe then cheese is better, yes.
Yeah. We'll sort that out. And maybe I can get you to cook your salad with the meat and the egg on top. Robert, thank you very much. Everyone who's watched, listens, please go listen to the podcast. Robert's already been one all about new bias, glow bias, which we haven't talked about today. So with Elnaz and Kota, so please go back, listen to that and many others. And Florian Jug, I think, has been on here as well. So another one, nice name drop in there, Robert. So thank you everyone for watching, listening. Robert, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. It's late in the evening for you as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Microscopists, a bite-sized bio podcast sponsored by Zeiss Microscopy. To view all audio and video recordings from this series, please visit bitesizebio.com/the-microscopists.